Welcome to the December 15, 2022 special meeting of the Lake Bluff Joint Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. Agenda item number 1, call to order, please.
Certainly. Member Danley.
Here.
Member Fisher. Member Miller.
Here.
Member Russell.
Here.
Member Sorensen.
Here.
Member Toll is absent. Chair Peters.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, non-agenda items and visitors' public comment time. We allocate 15 minutes during the course of this meeting to allow for individuals of the public to address any sort of issue that's not on the agenda tonight. Is there anyone who wishes to approach the commission? Hearing none, we'll proceed to agenda item number 3. Nothing on the internet, huh?
That's correct, yeah. So as a reminder, as always, the village does integrated virtual meetings. You can participate by phone, by Zoom. On this occasion, no one on the line, and so no one who would make themselves known to address you tonight, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Agenda item number 3, consideration of the November 16, 2022 PCZBA and HPC Special Joint Workshop Minutes. Do any of the commissioners have any proposed revisions?
I have one comment on the special meeting, page number 2, the 4th paragraph. Member Miller said he thinks 20% floor area. And I think that should really say thinks 20% increase in allowable floor area. Would be a better description.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Russell. Any other comments or proposed revisions? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve, please?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda item number 4, consideration of the November 16, 2022 PCZBA regular meeting minutes. Again, everybody's had a chance to review them. Any proposed changes or other revisions?
Just as a note, Mr. Chairman, we did circulate a slightly revised copy of these. I think the first draft had Member Sorensen listed as absent in error, so we regret the error. Revised copies there on the dais for you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Agenda item number 5 is administering the oath to those participating in the public hearings. Anyone who wishes to participate in the public hearing this evening, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, agenda item number 6, public hearing, residential variation, 618 Maple. That has been withdrawn.
That's correct. Apologies again for the confusion on this. So we had the packets all printed out. They were already on their way to your homes, and then this application was withdrawn late Friday. So sorry for the confusion there. We tried to notify you as soon as we could.
Is it going to be at a future date?
They've withdrawn completely. I'm not sure if they're intending to reapply or not.
All right, agenda item number 7, public hearing, Rio Development Plan, Lake Bluff Middle School, 31 and 121 East Sheridan Place. Mr. Cole, if you could give us an overview, please.
Certainly, and I know, of course, that our petitioners are here to present to you. As a reminder, this is the second application, really, that this body will hear that the village will consider under the village's RIO, or Recreational, Institutional, and Open Space zoning district rules. This is essentially, it's a streamlined process. It's tailor-made for other governmental agencies, public utilities, and so on. And it really functions as sort of a mandatory plan development tool. We know that these uses can't fit well into residential zoning or business zoning, and so we've tried to make a unique tool for them that really focuses on the most important outcomes the village is looking for in partnering with other agencies with these land uses to produce important services for the public. So on this occasion, as you'll know, and as you'll recall, the Architectural Board of Review exercises its site plan review for a project, and then that comes to this body to exercise really its planning and zoning review. It's a coordinated review process. The ABR held their meeting to review this last Tuesday and recommended, I believe it was 4-1 to, or excuse me, 3-1 to, that the village board would approve this plan as it pertained to their review, right, which is again really focused on architectural design and aesthetics and so on. They made their recommendation conditional upon the issues of noise, hours of operation, and lighting being addressed in the ordinance, which again, those are issues really germane to your body. There were some concerns expressed at that body about, that not really being their purview to decide, and so they discussed those, they acknowledged those, and recommended accordingly. The dissenting member expressed that, maybe the better place for this use would be across the street in Artesian Park, and that the site, may be better maintained as green space and so on. We've tried to summarize the ABR's deliberations and some of the comments made here in the staff memorandum for your consideration. We also tried to provide you some additional information about different plans undertaken by the school district, by the park district, and then again, information around some of the issues that were raised at the Architectural Board of Review meeting, trying to give you much information as we can think of, identify, locate to help you make a decision. So happy to answer any questions.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Cole. Is the petitioner present?
Yes.
If you could state your name for the record.
Hi, I am Nicole Elliott, and I am the president of the district PTO. And I, in conjunction with Dr. Leali and the administration, are proposing the LBMS sport court. So I began my term as the president of the Lake Bluff PTO in, I guess technically like May-ish of 2020. I took that on, and one of the initial things that you discuss are financials. Well, we were blessed with, a pretty substantial bank account. We're a nonprofit, and so our task as an organization and as a PTO is, what can we do with this funds to benefit beyond what the district provides for our school to enhance the experiences of the students and the teachers? And so we kind of put together a task force that combined the administration, the teachers, other parental input, and the PTO itself to come up with a list of ideas. When we did that, we came up with a long list, and there was the idea to focus on two main things. And I should mention too, a lot of the reason that bank account had grown is COVID. There wasn't a lot of spending, there weren't normal activities, so that kind of was accentuated over the prior 2 years, of not having the norm, and even into, really, this is the first year that we've resumed normal social activities, classroom enhancements, all of the things we do in terms of curriculum enhancement, internal parties at the school to help promote community and such as well. So, it kind of continued to grow. The ideas that were put into motion are the LBES courtyard improvements. So there's an internal courtyard, and we invested about $60,000 to improve the central courtyard to enhance the space both aesthetically, to maximize the natural kind of surrounding environment. We put in a sprinkler system. That area repeatedly had gone where it was no longer maintained and it wasn't used. So now children are able to do quiet activities, classroom projects, art, things of that nature in that space. And that was implemented at the end of October. That was completed. That one, didn't require the same amount because it was an internal space of approvals and such. The other that was prioritized per the opinion of the administrators, the teachers, and the PTO is the courtyard that we're here to discuss today. is the sport court. So I began an understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, per the comprehensive plan that's located on the website, all of the LBMS land is zoned as institutional land. With that institutional understanding, I mean, my general understanding, and I actually am seeking feedback on this, is that it's for the use of the institution and it's not open land. So that is the general understanding that we have in this process. The desire for the sport court is as much as recreation and safety as it is of gaining and regaining social skills with our students. Our current area for recess is in the west parking lot. That area is not well maintained. There's uneven asphalt. There's high temperatures when it's hot out. There's 2 hoops, they're dated, they're broken. Maintenance vehicles need to access this area directly where the children play to access the shed. Balls roll under cars, they've dented cars, children fall on the asphalt, they get pretty significant abrasion. There's exposure to Sheridan Road. You know what, I haven't been asking you to advance the slides. We're on about slide 4.
Oh, okay. You say
Sorry.
you're very,
I'm just speaking, and I'm like, I'm advancing them on my paper, but sorry about that.
capital, we have some
Yeah.
maps.
Yep, I pulled that directly from the village website, and here we are. There we go. Thank you. And, you know, they can't also use the green space that does exist during recess. There's limited supervision due to the allocation of staff. And so they're located only on the west parking lot, and they're not able to play recess in that green space that does exist. Moving on, taken from a more recent view of Google Earth, this is our current layout of the LBMS land that we just discussed is zoned as institutional. The current play area is over to the left. I'm not sure what's going on there. And then the only other piece of recreation equipment that exists on the lot is the Gaga pit. Moving on, as most recently as 2010, this is what existed in that current green space. In that open green space, there were 2 recreation areas, a circle drive, a parking lot, and a building. So much less green space than exists today. If we move on, in comparison of what facilities we have versus others in the district that also exist within neighborhoods. We have Oak Grove, Deer Path, Highland, and Millbourne that all have dedicated outdoor recreation spaces that are age appropriate for middle school children. Moving on. So what was proposed is trying to keep in mind the idea that we want to provide the existing resources that kids use at recess and enhance them to also incorporate PE so we can enhance that curriculum, and ensuring that we minimize the impact to the land that exists, and also ensure ADA compliance for our students who have disabilities. So what was proposed through the use of the vendors that we reached out to was about 6,646 square feet of surface area that would be taken up. That consists primarily of 6,480 of the sport court, and the remainder being a sidewalk to access the sport court from existing sidewalk space. According to White Engineering, there's 93,532 square feet of green space on that green lot. So the proposed court amounts to about 7.1% of the existing green space. Again, 1.5 basketball courts, 3 will be, they're all permanent. 1 will be adjustable for the ADA compliance. And there's green surface to blend with the grass in the proposed lot that we'll get to. There are 3 badminton courts. Pickleball was removed. I know there's a consideration that badminton is similar to pickleball in the court lining. That is not false. It is very similar, like the back lines are approximately slightly more, but the reason that these still exist are for the purposes of PE so that the net sports can be played outside. There's no permanent nets that will exist. There's no holes in the court that would allow for permanent nets. So the idea is just for the use of PE to use those like racket sports during that. Also, there will be 4 foursquare games because kids do often play foursquare. This is played with like a kickball type ball. No lights were ever proposed, nor are they in the plans, no speakers. Again, ADA compliant, and then there will be a camera installed for video monitoring to monitor the usage of the court. So that is a general summary of the proposal. The court surface itself is a concrete base, which is longer lasting than asphalt. It's better in our kind of current climate that we have. And it's a high impact modular propylene surface, which is essentially a harder plastic with interlocking tiles, such that if a small area gets damaged or stuff, those tiles can be removed and the individual tiles can be replaced. Any colors can be used, lines can be painted, and there's a lot of flexibility. This surface is known to lessen the impact, lessen abrasion. It's safer for children to play on than an asphalt surface. It also, because of the plastic on top of concrete, does lessen the noise somewhat. There was a lot of consideration and discussion, moving on to the next slide, of where could such a facility exist. Obviously, the first one considered was the current location. It was determined that the west lot is not desired because there's a lot of incoming visitor traffic, maintenance of vehicle traffic that does, you can see that shed, it's the white roof, kind of where your cursor just was, in the lower left corner, but that's the maintenance shed. There's unannounced vehicles that come in all throughout the day, so that poses a risk to children, especially in this day and age. There's close proximity to Sheridan Road, which they're closer to people passing by. There's parked cars, again, we've discussed that, and additional room is needed for the purposes of pickup, safety, and drop-off. And right now, children are sometimes being dropped off in the middle of the road, so if we had a better flow, that might also improve the safety of the children. The north lot was also considered, and while there's adequate space there with the recent renovations, there was a lot of new drainage that was put under there for both sewage, water, so the expense of that in redoing that space would be quite significant. Currently, there's a slope that is towards the street of that facility, so that would cause balls to roll. It's close to the road. Balls could bounce into that area quite easily. So that was why, that one wasn't quite optimal. And then when polling the administration as well, and getting input from the teachers, that area is really close to academic classrooms that could disrupt, the core academics that occur in that area. Lastly, those spaces are needed to meet the number of spaces required for the number of people working in that location in terms of administration and staff. So that kind of led us, and I should say there was one more even location that I don't have on the slide considered, but just south of that maintenance shed, we looked at that too. That area is real low lying, and they didn't feel the drainage would be appropriate, and then we sought feedback from the police, and they thought that would be really hard to monitor in that location because it's so set back. So that led us to the east lot, where you could access both the sport court as well as the grass area for recess, use the Gaga court and have it be better recreation for the purposes of recess, and it addresses all that safety concerns by getting it away from the traffic, the cars, Sheridan, etc. So that is that in the summary. In moving on, this still existed from the ABR, but just to understand, especially for your purposes, when you look at the site plan, I think to me it was somewhat confusing because the area in red almost appeared as that was going to be the entire area of the sport court. That is the area that is all that would be disrupted to do the important required grading of the sport court. The area in green is the actual sport court itself. The blue was just outlined to represent that Field hockey is played there currently, so are a lot of other activities, and that space would still be present and able to be used for things like graduation, t-ball, flag football, dog readings, etc., because the whole area of that green space is represented by the yellow lines, and so a lot of that area will still exist. Okay, moving on. When we met with Mariani, who is our desired vendor for landscaping, they took a look at the engineering plans, and with the grading that will be required for the court, and the fact that that will cause the court to be recessed, their suggestion was simply replacement of the sod and the grass to the original state, and actually improving the current state of that grass because it's a little rough around there right now. So essentially this is saying that that's what they will do, and that's what's in their plan. Moving on, I did want to incorporate out of the recommendation of Glenn and Drew that the district and the administration was approached by Mr. Tanner to create a path from Circle Drive. This path is often traveled unofficially, and there's basically an unofficial path, and Mr. Tanner is proposing actually making that a formal path of asphalt. So, Mr. Tanner, do you want to speak? Where are you? Do you want to speak to this?
You're doing a very great job.
Okay, so, he is proposing that this is not something that PTO would propose. It was not part of the original plan, but because we already have the meeting set up and the engineering firm aligned, it was really easy to say to our engineering firm, hey, will this mess up the grading? Could this be done from an official standpoint? They were able to incorporate that path as a suggestion at this time. They are technically two separate projects. Mr. Tanner is generously offering to privately fund this, and so the reason it's being mentioned is again, Glenn and Drew kind of suggested to do it now because it kind of fits in with the analysis of the grading and things of that nature. So this is Mr. Tanner's drawing, that it's a 4-foot wide asphalt, it's 106 feet in length, and it's 424 additional square footage. The next slide is just the technical drawing from.
If I could jump in for just
Yeah.
one moment. I was going to save this for the end, but just to emphasize that that updated drawing was shared with members of the commission and updated online a couple days ago. And so you have that drawing in front of you and on paper as well as a revised ordinance that just originally we said in text, there's going to be a path here, and now you have a drawing that shows that path. So just wanted to
Right,
clarify.
so that's just, listed, and this is just a shot of that. And I think, Mr. Tanner, if I'm not mistaken, the part on school property would be asphalt, and the part from Circle Drive, that's not yet determined, until it gets to school property, what that would be.
Right, the circle part, if you will, is on school property. The other part, south of the big line down there, is sort of public roadway, if you will. And the proposal, if you will, that will be presented by the school will not include that.
So that is the reason that that is incorporated right now. And then lastly, the summary of feedback. We realize we're a tight-knit community. We want to, the whole idea around this is to allow an opportunity for our kids to have a safe play space, that there's an area that can optimize the resources we have available. There's been a lot of setback in terms of communication skills and socialization and getting people out active, and we want to really use the school property as, it's felt that it's intended to promote the health, both mentally and physically, of our children. In this process, we've gotten feedback, and some of it was mentioned in the ABR meeting. There's concern of the hours. The initial proposal was dawn to dusk, and that was only because those are the hours of typical park hours. So we were just, logically following that consideration. Understanding that this is a little bit more residentially, enclosed, definitely the consideration of posted hours is a great consideration. We would just want to seek that feedback from the village and the police as what realistically can be monitored, so that it can be appropriately implemented and clearly implemented. The concern of noise. There is no hiding that this will bring noise. I mean, children playing, having, fun, there'll be more noise if they're using the green space even, because there'll be more children using that space. So it's not denied that there'll be more noise, balls bouncing make noise, but the court is physically as close to the school as it can be and as far from the residential areas in that lot. So the idea, and that was taken and that was purposely done to try to minimize that sound. Foursquare also could make some noise, that would be less, because again, it's like a kickball. Lastly, pickleball was removed. I've already mentioned that Batman lines exist, Batman, I don't know what game that is, but badminton lines now exist to allow for PE classes to play racket sports. And, we feel that's within the curriculum. They play these sports in the gym, and it would be wonderful to enhance that when weather permits to play those outside, get fresh air, get a brain break. So we want to allow the kids to have that. There's also only the one gym, so they'll have additional space to all be playing at one time instead of a lot of people sitting. So, I think those are a lot of the areas. And again, the lights, I didn't put this on here because there was never a plan for lights. So, just to reiterate that. Are there any, and then I have a question, but I'm sure you have questions as well. Just not having done this process before, I know that we are institutionally zoned. So what is really what is the next step and what happens in this whole process? And, can certain things be allowed or not? I'm not sure I understand, and even some of the administration. So that would be my question.
Well, from a process perspective, we'll ask you a few questions, and then it'll go up for public can comment, obviously, and then we'll have perhaps more questions, and then we'll deliberate. And in this particular instance, we are a recommending body. We're not a definitive body.
Okay.
So the recommendation would then go to the village council.
Okay, so the village council is, and I guess that's a part that I really didn't understand. So that's
Yes.
helpful. Okay, great.
I think, Ms. Elliott, though, before you complete your presentation, if you could go through the standards. I know you've completed them somewhere in your packet.
Yep. And when you're referring to the standards, the responses to the questions?
Let's see here.
So,
Yeah, the Rio Development Plan standards.
yeah,
I just want to make a record.
absolutely. So do you want me to read the responses verbatim?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the general standard and development in accordance with the Rio Development Plan will not have a substantial undue adverse effect upon adjacent property, the character of the area, or the public health, safety, or general welfare. The court was designed to be intentionally green to blend with the landscape. As it is on school property, schools are expected to have adequate age-appropriate outdoor recreation spaces for children. The addition of a sport court would allow LBMS to meet this expectation. Public health is enhanced with this addition as it allows an additional means of promoting physical and mental health for the school children and community members. Furthermore, it promotes the safety of the school children and recess monitors by moving activities from the parking lot that anyone can enter to the east side of the school that is more protected from unannounced visitors. Continue on with the land use prop. So should I just read the whole application?
You know what we could do? We could just adopt and incorporate by reference.
Okay.
Because it is,
It is
you
lengthy.
have submitted it, so we'll do that.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had one quick question, though, when you were talking
Absolutely.
about Mr. Tanner's proposal. Is there a way that you could better visualize it for me? Where the trail, where the path goes?
Absolutely. If we Could we reference the site plan, and I don't know what slide the number, but the one with the colored outlines?
Colored outline.
Yeah, and it just says site plan for the header. Yes, so, if you look to the, you see where it says actually Port Court, because it was cut off, but Sport Court signs, Sport Court may only be used from dawn to dusk. Again, this is the original proposal. That wording, those round circles are representative of existing trees. That also is along a sidewalk. So if you go to maybe the 2 slides up, where it then goes to his proposed path, yes. So that is going from there. The reason it kind of arcs is there's actually an existing tree there. And then there's basically an existing opening in the trees to Circle Court that have mulch kind of right in the easement area, Mr. Tanner?
Yeah, let me,
Thank you.
Sure.
He knows it best. I don't want to
Paul,
speak.
thank you very much.
John Tanner, 115 East Witchwood. And what we're proposing here is this pathway, which is really grass right now. But down to the south, if you will, or you've got the dark line there, that's the property line for the school. And if you'll notice, you'll see Circle Drive, and then there's what I'm calling an apron. That exists today, and it's been there for decades and decades and decades. You know, see, you used to, when you had the East School, before that was torn down, that pathway, if you will, or that apron, led to a sidewalk that went all the way to Artesian Park type of thing. And so in 2011, when the school was torn down, we lost our pathway. So now what we're proposing here is that we have a pathway so that basically it makes it more convenient during inclement weather, and especially with youngsters, if you will, with tyke bikes and even see women with strollers, if you will, with little kids and things like that. So as opposed to walking across the rough grass, especially during inclement weather and that type of thing, this is hopefully going to solve that problem and make it more convenient.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tanner.
Okay.
Very generous. Thank you.
Anything else?
That's it for me. Let me see. Any questions from the commissioners?
I'd like to start by noting, for the record, and I'm mindful of the fact that I also am in LBMS, it's easier to say, neighbor, and I also received notification of this meeting, so I sat and pondered through this as well. So I also am going to state before I go into any questions that while I have tendered the argument at times that people who choose to live in the central business district or near a park district or near the schools, we know what we're buying into, so we have what we have. That said, that's never quite felt right. Because as you started off, we are a village and we're a town of neighbors. So I'll start off with that. I guess my first question is, was usage of the west lot considered such that it could accommodate the pickleball, which sounds like that was in the original iteration
The
desired.
actual court was considered to be put in where the existing recess occurs. But because of the consideration of the traffic, the unannounced visitors, the need for existing parking spaces, it wouldn't eliminate the need of balls going under cars, all those things, it was deemed with the administration that that's not ideal for the safety of the students.
Okay.
And especially in this day and age when things are getting increasingly messy out there.
Okay. And then I also want to clarify that there are no fences included in this surrounding the sport court,
No.
right? And then with the the grading that goes into this, as a neighbor, I know how boggy the land is, because I used to trek back and forth to LBMS as a volunteer. And now I walk my dog back and forth all the time across the former East School lot. So both areas are not even seasonally, it's just when we get rain, they're very wet. And that holds water. Certainly the old East School area holds water. So is there any address? It doesn't sound like anybody's addressing that. I'm worried that the sport court will.
The engineering firm addressed it through the analysis that was performed in terms of the grading requirements, the amount of distance from the court to the road, and the fact that there is a lot of green space to absorb water from a runoff situation. There's a 1% grade of the court once it's laid. It's only 1% so that balls don't roll and everything. So, you know, the runoff in terms of, it just essentially goes to the side and goes in and then will be absorbed by the land.
Okay, I might dispute that as someone who walks there all the time, so. Those are my thoughts for the moment. Well, actually, one other question. And I say this as a former president of the Alliance for Excellence, so I know what it is to walk through the process with the schools and gift the schools something. What is the maintenance plan after the schools have been received this donation?
Right, so we've discussed with the school that they will continue to clear it in the time. It has at least a 20-year life expectancy, and then it will be the responsibility of the PTO to help build in funds for the eventual, like if it needs to be replaced or such down the line.
Okay, and would that be in writing someplace?
It's not yet,
Okay.
because nothing's approved.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Swartzen. Who's next?
I have a
Ms.
couple quick.
Fisher?
Okay. Just a few questions. I keep hearing that it's recessed. Is that recessed the 2.5-foot grade, or is it recessed more than that?
My understanding, I'm not an engineer, but based on the engineering feedback that we received, it's recessed the 2.5 feet. Yes.
Okay. Glenn, I guess this is a question for you, or maybe Mr. Tanner. Who owns the parcel that starts that drive, or that starts that new walkway? You know, your address is Witchwood. It looks like that parcel is on Circle. Is that school-owned land? I'm just confused. Who owns
Yeah,
that
so
new
as
walkway?
it's, and I should clarify here, you know, we haven't studied that particular question in great detail, right? I mean, there can be recorded easements at this point. If
Oh,
you
it's an
have
easement over,
potentially, I mean, there can be prescriptive easements when you have, you know, improvements like this that have existed for so long a period of time, and there's a lot of ways that might get there. The way the tax map is drawn shows that the two parcels to the left and to the right on Circle Drive kind of extend fingers, if you would, that they touch, that there's actually no direct connection between Circle Drive and the public property on the school district site, right?
Okay.
But at the same time, there's certainly a concrete apron there. There's certainly, at least my recollection was that from time to time you can see where there's a beaten footpath there. And this plan, approval of this plan only authorizes construction on the school district property.
okay.
So
And
nothing you do here, to be clear, gives them the right to trespass or to do other
I just was
improvements.
confused on how that fit together, kind of. And then I guess one question, or the other question was, any feedback from the neighbors on Circle? I'm not seeing anything in the packet or anything, but have you heard from plus or minus?
Yes.
Okay.
I've been talking to the neighbors there because they are the ones who will be impacted the most, both from the standpoint of convenience and also any potential additional activity. In the response, I've talked to, out of the 8 properties, if you will, right along Circle there, I've been able to talk to 7 of the property owners, and they all basically say yes. In fact, the first comment I got was, it's obvious, in terms of, it's something that, really should be done. And I think there was an expectation even that it might have been done as part of the tear down of the East School, but of course it was not. So,
But, so is that also their feedback toward having the sport court there, or are you talking
I
about just the
did not
driveway?
touch the,
Okay, you're just talking about the walkway.
just the walkway, right?
Okay,
So, yeah.
okay. I just am curious whether there
Okay.
was any feedback about, they haven't responded.
Yeah, I haven't taken any calls on this one to the extent
Okay.
either the ABR or the PCZBA, any village body received feedback. It was included in your packet. So I'll mention too, these owners would have received public notice, the same as anyone within 300 feet of the school district property, and that talked about the sport court as well as potentially landscaping and paths to be built in conjunction with the project.
Okay, okay. All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Mr. Russell?
I have several questions, but first, just to clarify for Member Fisher, her question about the recess of the court, and maybe for everyone, I don't know if White Engineering is represented here tonight, but the court is only recessed when you look at it from the east and when you look at it from the south. There will be slight grades down of about
Okay.
2 feet from the field to the edge of the court as you approach from the south and as you approach from the east. But the surface.
It's not sunken, in
The
other
water,
words.
no, then the
Right, and
water
then
will
it
run
levels
across
out.
the court if there's drainage. And it'll then continue on east or into the parking lot.
Okay,
So as viewed from the north or from the west, it's at grade, if you will.
okay. Thank you,
So it's not
George.
completely sitting in the ground.
Okay.
And then I was hoping that someone from the school administration could provide some commentary on the feasibility of losing the north lot, the northeast lot, and moving all of the parking requirements in total to the west area, because it's been suggested that the sport court be put in the northeast lot. And I'd like to hear from the administration as to whether or not you, from a practical perspective of loading, the whole schmash, not bus pickup, what is the real, from your viewpoint, the practicality of losing that lot to parking and traffic?
Pardon me, I didn't stand up and raise my hand earlier. Do I need to be sworn in?
Yeah, we should swear you in. Look at my notes. Yeah, and you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And state your name for the record
Sure.
then.
Nate Blackmer, I'm the principal at Lake Bluff Middle School.
I'm Jay Kahn, I'm the Director of Finance and Operations.
Okay.
So, Jay and I'll sort of take turns if that's okay. One of our, just from a historical perspective, one of the things that was done within the last 6 years was to get the buses off from Sheridan Place for the pickup of students at the end of the day in an effort to alleviate traffic on Sheridan Place Road. Our bus loop became what is now, in part, the east parking lot, right, where you're talking about proposing or potentially putting the sport court. That's been an extremely valuable move for us. It's gotten kids in a safe place for boarding the buses that can be well supervised, and it's gotten those buses off the road. One of the continuing challenges that we have is car traffic for the parents that are picking up at the end of the day. One of the issues we've tried to address is that cars are backing up almost all the way to Sheridan Road. We've put some cones out there to try and provide better visibility for cars that are turning onto Sheridan Place. Ultimately, we would like to be able to start bringing cars off from Sheridan Place to create a pickup loop in that east parking lot that you've just referred to, not to mention, the west parking lot, thank you. For pickup at the end of the day, that seems to be an ideal way to do it. We still then would have access to that shed for the garbage trucks. That's where our dumpsters are, is back by the shed. Those come in throughout the day to empty the dumpsters. We need access to that shed for our maintenance crew. It's a great way to perhaps also alleviate some of that traffic on Sheridan Place that we've gotten some feedback on. Putting a sport court there would impede our ability to do that.
Is there, I assume that over the course of the whole school year, there's any number of special events from school-wide events to classroom events where you have an influx of extra cars beyond faculty and,
Thank you. Yeah, that's the other piece. I wouldn't recommend eliminating any of the current parking that we have. As it is, it's insufficient for some of those things you just mentioned. I just left the building this evening. We were hosting the 7th grade basketball tournament for the girls. There was not enough parking for the 4 teams that were there at that time. We had cars parking on the road. Both lots were full when it comes to band concerts, chorus concerts, musicals, graduations. We actually can't park all of the cars that come for those events. So eliminating parking would be not my recommendation.
Even during the day, when we have meetings, we have people coming from the other building and that can use up the parking spaces as well. The community uses them as well for the baseball, when people have games across the street at Artesian Park. Both lots fill up with cars for the baseball and soccer fields over there. 4th of July, both, they use our lots for that. So that lot is never empty. It's always full of cars, and it's very difficult to add cars to the west lot because of some of the things Nate was talking about. We have garbage, that's where our dumpsters are, that's where our maintenance vehicles are, our maintenance shed is back there. So some of that space, we can't park cars in on a going basis.
okay, thank you. And then a couple detailed questions. One, I think as I'm reading this, it does say that the basketball goals are permanent and in place. Is that correct? So they're going to be sunk in the ground and you won't be able to move them?
Right, because if they were to be moved, they would be broken very easily.
Okay.
And with expansion and contraction and our changing temperatures, they would not be maintainable for, a very long time.
Okay, I'm not familiar with the details of the physical ed operation, but I was very, very surprised that 2 of the 3 poles are plopped sort of in the middle of the court. It would limit any number of other activities when you have these hard poles. I don't know why you wouldn't have the 3 poles along the perimeter of the court so that you could
That would have
you could
required us.
increase other types of, hopscotch, dodgeball, kickball. You won't be able to do those type of events if you have 2 solid poles safely, because kids could be
Right,
chasing a
so
ball and you can run right into a
They're
pole.
padded, and they're well padded. If we would have moved the orientation, it would have taken up more of the green space, and it would have to increase the size, because if you think about, you would have to then rotate it. It has to be the full size of a middle school regulation. We did it in accordance with the middle school size of a basketball court,
It's way less than the size of a basketball court.
not a middle school
For
court.
the goals.
No, not for the
For-
middle
for-
school court.
For where the baskets are, the court overall may be the right size, but at any rate, that's just an observation. It struck me as very strange, and I hope if it goes forward that someone might think about all the different sport opportunities you have for youth, that to put the 2 of the basketball goals with the poles right in the middle of the sport court, which I think is overall, I think it's a great idea to have this better surface for the kids to play on. Not arguing against that, but it just really surprised me. And then the other thing is, I'm assuming one of the normal activities is this Foursquare game. All 4 of the 4 squares are plopped right next to the basketball goals, so you can't play basketball. And I assume some kids like to play basketball at recess, some like to play Foursquare, but because of the goals, the way they are in the middle, you won't be able to play both. So that, I just hope that a little more thought goes into the overall layout of the court, not where it is, or not the overall size, but just why those goals are where they are. Because it doesn't, for overall phys ed activities and recess activities, it doesn't make too much sense to me. But I'm not the PE director, so just an observation of a zoning board member. Let's see, I did have a question. In the engineering drawings, there's a sidewalk shown along the south side of the northeast lot. And I assumed that that was going in as part of the project, because there isn't one there now. Does anyone know, Glenn,
So
is that,
That was in the
proposed to be-
overview of it. I think I referenced the court is 6,480 square feet, and then I mentioned a number slightly higher. The remaining is a 5-foot concrete extension of the existing sidewalk to the sport court.
and I'm not talking about the extended lot, I'm talking about and some of the engineering drawings show a sidewalk going to the north from the existing north-south lot, all the way out to Sheridan Place. I'm wondering if that's part of the project, if it's an error from an old
No,
drawing?
I don't.
Okay,
ever
but the engineering drawings show a sidewalk there, so someone might want to look at that, but that's not part of the project, correct?
No.
Can you find it easily, Mr. Russell?
There is a sidewalk there currently. That's
No,
the-
there's
that's
not. The sidewalk goes around the corner, but there's, on
There's egress.
the east side of the north lot, there is no sidewalk that goes down to Sheridan Place.
Oh, there.
Perhaps at one time there was a plan, and maybe this is a carryover from an old plan, but it's on the drawing, so I was just wondering where, if it's part of the project or not. Right here. But it's not part of the
Not
project?
there.
Okay,
No, I don't
not part of the
recall seeing
project.
that there. No.
Okay. And then just to clarify the architectural drawings, I don't know why this is so many times with architects, and if there's any architects in the room, I apologize, but the architectural drawings show the whole sport court being about 15 to 20 feet east of where the engineering drawings show it to be. And that, I'm assuming we're going by the layout on the engineering drawings. So that essentially the east edge of the sport court is going to be lined up with the east edge of the Gaga
The
pit.
renderings, are you referring to the
renderings, yeah, the
green?
architects-
That was just done by the vendor and is not 100% to scale. Yes,
Okay.
we will be going by the engineering. That
Okay.
was the best ability to do a representation in their renderings.
Okay. And then, I don't know if the Architectural Review Board commented on this or not, but I was disappointed in Mariani's plans that this is a real detail, but their suggestion was just to pull out all of the existing shrubs. It's not really connected to the sport court, but it's in the plan
so-
submitted to us, to pull out all the old shrubs that died, I think, because they weren't maintained, and just don't put anything back. And that wall there around the HVAC
Yes.
structure
it's
is not a very pleasant wall, so I'm
I
very
should've-
disappointed as to why, and I don't know if ARB even noted that with everything they were talking about.
I can give
Don't recall
context to
that
that.
coming up.
It was me trying to be helpful to say, could we pull them out with this project with the intention of replacing them? The district, and correct me if I'm wrong, will replace
So
them.
you would want to put something back?
We would definitely
Okay.
put something that hopefully could, the arborvitae, is my understanding, haven't worked twice. So we'll try to find a better solution, that was something that will actually last. But given we will have them out, I was just saying, let's take them out at that time because they're already out there. So it was just the intention to help, and nothing more than that. And then the district said they would replace them because that's a part of the contract from the, what do you call that, cooling area,
The chiller area.
the
Okay.
chiller area.
Because we're basically asked in a vote here to approve what's on
Yes.
the drawings and the material submitted and all these things I'm questioning.
Yes.
There's these conflicts.
And that could just,
And the
you know,
statements are made, the bushes are coming out, cut to the ground,
Yes.
nothing about new bushes going in.
and
And
that's
if we could have
probably
that part of the record,
on me as part of, just being a volunteer, and I was just like, hey, we're out there, so let's have these pulled out, because they're dead, they're very dead and ugly, so,
Okay.
so.
good. No, I'm glad to hear that the desire is to put something
Yes,
green back there to hide
Something
that
hardier.
wall.
yeah,
Okay. And well, I guess I do want to comment on even though paddleball is no longer part of the project, I'm glad it's not, because in readings about pickleball, I'm sorry, there are court cases all over the country about, unfortunately, the noise that the wiffle ball makes when it's struck by a hard paddle. So if there is plans to resurrect that, it has to be thought through very thoroughly, because definitely does create a problem
Yeah,
for
I
some
mean,
people.
there's no plans. There's existing pickleball courts in Lake Bluff. It was heard by the neighbors that that's not desired, and I think that's an easy compromise. I think there's enough activities that can be done within a PE setting. So it was taken out.
I mean, my own personal recommendation is that the signs that go on to limit the times also have a line underneath that says no pickleball, because of the fact that the badminton court lines are almost identical to pickleball. And it will be very tempting for people to bring in these pickleball nets are very portable. You can walk right in and set them up, just to get the message across. That if it moves forward maybe my fellow members will disagree with me, but I hope not. And then last but not least, as a permitted time, I can't imagine why we would want anything to start before 8 AM in terms of kids playing on the court. Sunrise in the summer is 5:30 in Lake Bluff. I don't want an ordinance that says they can officially start playing sports out there at 5:30, but that would be my recommendation to my fellow members. And I think that's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Any other comments from the commissioners?
Go ahead.
All right.
Go ahead.
Just as a thought based on a comment in the packet, was there any discussion with the Park District about combining Artesian Park and the sport court into a single project?
There hasn't been discussion, and the reason there was not discussion kind of goes back to the element of supervision and the time kids have for recess. The recess is the remainder of their lunchtime, and if I'm not mistaken, it's 10 to 15 minutes max. So the mere logistics of ensuring supervision over there, getting them there after they're rushing through their lunches as it is, does not really support that. So there wasn't a discussion based on the feedback from the administration.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller.
I was just going to comment that, first of all, it was a presentation, thank you. I mean, you've worked hard, and your volunteer service is just greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
I think when we say it's zoned as an institution for the institution is something that we have to keep in mind, right? That this is, I grew up and there was a large building there. I had very little green space. So I think we've all been used to having a lot of green space right now and turning it into a dog park to, playing ball. But when you say 7% will be the green space, we need to keep that in mind, that you're still.
7% will be the sport court.
Sorry, 7% will be the sport court, and you have so much of the percent. The rest of the percentage is left as green space. And I just hope for our record that we put in no pickleball and also that replacing the landscape. And if we can add some of those things that I think we've all
And
are
I could
agreeing
even
to.
have Mariani amend their contract.
Right,
That's an
so-
oversight on my part.
That's my only
Thank you.
comment.
Just a couple questions, Ms. Elliott. When you look at the placement of the standards for the basketball hoops, the one I think is on the south side, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you ever explore shifting the configuration so that that one would be on the north side and kind of flipping the court 180 degrees? Just exploring it for more of a potential sound.
Yes,
effect.
there were assessments by the engineering firm in terms of the existing grading of the land. The desire, then it would be farther into the green space because it would be running east to west and keeping that same dimension and having a court and a half. And so while you would have more area to the north and the south, it would infringe upon the space for like field hockey and stuff because of the 108 feet of the length for a court and a half.
I guess maybe I maybe I was misunderstood, just flipping the location of the,
So having the half court, I'm sorry, on the
Yeah.
south side? Okay, I'm sorry. I was thinking 90 degrees
no,
and you
I
said 180.
understand.
That's my, that very much could be a consideration. And what do you think is the perceived benefit of that?
I wasn't sure if it would maybe reduce, a little bit of noise activity if the bulk of the basketball activity is to the north, having that single
Right.
goal on that side.
I think, and kind of going back to your question about the Foursquare, I think it was thought in terms of how kids currently play, and they usually play a couple different groups on one hoop. And so the thought was that maybe one group is on the half court, another group is on, part of a full court, and some are using the Foursquare. I think that was, the vendor is who proposed this, and based on, a lot of experience in doing other schools. And so I think it was just proposed because of how kids currently play. Now, that said, something like that, if that, or the kids could be guided to please first play here, under the supervision, and if that could help from the perspective of the circle court proximity, I don't think that would be a problem whatsoever.
And I'm just raising the question generally. I certainly can't comment
Yeah.
on what's
Now,
best from a,
I guess the only thing is that the idea of the adjustable hoop would be on the half court. So it would be farther for those children with disabilities to then travel to, because they're coming out essentially from those, there's doors where there's those steps. And so maybe that would require us to change the location of that sidewalk to make it the shortest route possible.
so one of the adjustable standards is just to the, on the north end, basically, one of those two is adjustable.
Yes, it was, the idea was it for it to be the half court one.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions right now from the commissioners?
One more question. I understand that the ABR said nothing about any additional landscaping or screening. Is that correct? In their passage. And I thought that might be something to consider. I hear kids out at recess some days, not when it's raining, but so I hear them out there, and I'm a little bit farther distant from the school than the closest couple of neighbors are. So I wondered if that was something that's on your potential list. The trees that run along that right-of-way easement and those neighbors that are closest to East School, a lot of them have fallen down, ash trees. So the density has definitely diminished all around the school. So that's another consideration, and I would love to hear if anybody's discussed that.
Again, Mariani came out and they made the proposal that they did because they felt that the existing trees provide some coverage. And so they went with the current recommendation. I think one thought was that where would you stop with trees then? Like how do you prioritize which neighbors get trees? And then it honestly becomes a budget issue too. So some can be considered for sure, but where would you stop?
Well, that's what I'm asking you, so.
Right.
I think it's worthy of consideration. I know the school district has done that in the past, so it's part of being a neighbor too, to maintain your trees, so.
Right.
Yep.
I think those trees though that are on Circle, I don't know, where do those, I'm not sure which property line those are on.
Right. I understand. Okay.
Any other questions for Ms. Elliott at this time? All right. Hearing none, is there anybody that wants to testify from the public? Okay, please And we typically allow 5 minutes.
Oh, I can't. Hi, thank you. My name is Krista Marcasello. I live at 319 Vincent Court with my husband and my 2 daughters, both of which attend the middle school and the elementary school. Thank you, Nicole. You've done a lot of work. Thank you. I'm here because I love our community and I really am concerned about school development. When the PTO first approached the homeowners about a sport court, I assumed it would replace the existing basketball courts, not be built on the green space. I feel like green space is a valued commodity here in Lake Bluff, and if we can avoid building on it, I think we should try and do that. So I want to ask the school and the PTO one more time, please, can you try and go back and see if we can use the west lot creatively as opposed to the green space? But if it's already been decided that the only place to build the court is on the green space, I feel like its primary use should be for the school. And having said that, there should be a locked fence around the court so that we are able to limit the use of the court. I think some tall shrubs would provide some adequate decoration and aesthetically pleasing as opposed to just a fence. We all want a safe place for our kids to have recess at school, and the sport court was pitched as such, a place for the students to have gym, recess, get outdoors, off technology. I agree with the PTO 100% that the current recess space is not adequate for our students, and I have a daughter that is in 6th grade. The presentation was made to the board that said from dawn to dusk, consistent with the park district, but this is supposed to be a school sport court. Why are we having park district hours? I feel like it's almost impossible to monitor the use of the sport court if it's not fenced in during the summer hours. I mean, one thing I love about being here is how we get outside so often, and I feel like it stays light so late, and if we have people using the court from 5:30 at dawn till 9:30 at night sometimes, it's gonna be a little disturbing for the neighbors around. If the court is not fenced in, you're inviting a lot of people to use it for much longer than what we, as the neighbors, were initially told its purpose was gonna be. We have a lot of little kids on our street, and I, for one, am concerned with the traffic that it might bring. To be fair to the neighbors, I really would like it to be limited for school use. The original proposition was a court by halves in size that would be not only basketball nets and foursquare. I'm sorry to beat the pickleball thing to death, but if you have badminton lines, you're gonna have people come play pickleball. Living in New Jersey, I can attest, Mr. Russell, it is loud. We could hear it from blocks away when we lived in New Jersey. I feel like we need to remove, as a courtesy to the neighbors that live around this court, we need to remove the badminton lines. I think you're just inviting people to come and try and play pickleball. I, for one, want to find a compromise that is acceptable to the school, the PTO, and the neighbors that are affected. So I'm asking, please reconsider adjusting the court so that we may still provide for the kids at school, but also the homeowners that are affected on the surrounding streets that we love so much. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Peters, members of the board, my name's Frank Swanton. I live at 363 Vincent Court. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. I was not going to attend this meeting, but I was encouraged to do so. I will try to be brief, but I have a lot to cover. I intend to make comments on a couple of slides, as well as the application, RAO, and draft ordinance. The first slide that they had told about all the people that are interested in this and such. It's their very first slide, I think. While you're looking for that, maybe you could tell us, Nicole, how much this project is going to cost.
We haven't gotten revised figures post-inflation. It's not a question and answer session yet.
It never has been. I think it's very interesting that they're coming to two boards and have been harassing the neighbors for all this time. They don't even know how much this project is gonna cost. I mean, it may cost way more than they have money for. I mean, there's so many questions here. Anyway, you said that the PTO would take care of the maintenance of this court. It's a 20-year court, fine, but there still is maintenance
Excuse
that
me,
needs to be.
Mr. Swan, you should be directing your questions to us as opposed to Nicole,
Okay,
directing your comments to us.
okay. They testified that it was a 20-year court and that the school would maintain it other than the court, the 20-year court. I'm wondering, there's hoops, there's nets, there's all sorts of different maintenance that's gonna need to be done. Who's gonna do this maintenance? Are they gonna pay for is the PTO gonna pay for this maintenance? Or are the taxpayers gonna pay for the maintenance? I was originally told by Nicole that this idea came about from a focus group with fifth graders and Nicole. Now it seems that a whole list of people are involved. Up there. However, in your list of supporters, I do not see departments listed for PE. Does that mean that the PE is not supporting this, or they forgot to be contacted for this? The neighbors have rarely been consulted or included in any discussions. In fact, in the one and only meeting, a Zoom meeting, the neighborhood was locked out. Throughout the process, it had always been, Nicole says, no backup to prove her statements. The neighborhood has asked the applicants repeatedly to consult with a noise research firm to measure the noise produced by the court, how far it will travel, and in what direction it will travel. They have continued to ignore our requests. Nicole says the noise will be okay. The neighborhood was told by Nicole that the court was for the middle school students and would be used for PE and recess. Now we are being told that this facility will be open from dawn to dusk and is for the community. The court should be open during school hours on school days, as Nicole originally proposed to the neighborhood. Dawn to dusk, 7 days a week, 12 months a year is totally unacceptable. This is a residential neighborhood, does not need a community basketball court. Basketball is available at parks, indoors at the middle school, and at the Lake Bluff Park District. Additionally, a drive through Lake Bluff will find many residents have their own basketball hoops. Lake Bluff is not lacking basketball hoops or places for kids to hang out. This is another example of how the neighborhood has been deceived by Nicole. I've been to 3 of these proposals so far, 3 separate meetings. Every single one is different. There's always something that's tweaked or changed, or it's 7% on here, it's 10% coverage, 7% coverage now. It was 10% before. On their application, it's 15%. What is it? Is it any of those? I don't know. I was also told by Nicole that this court was for the health and mental health of the students. I find it extremely hard to believe that playing on a plastic surface is better for the students' health than playing on an open grassed area. I think a doctor who specializes in children's health of the middle school age should be consulted and the results shared with the public, rather than Nicole says. The slide with the basketball players on it. This picture is very deceiving. A fence divides that property there. The one end has a gate, as you can see there. The other end does not have a gate. So very simply, you could put a gate on the other end and you could stop your traffic from going through there in the recess area. The blacktop is in fact in disrepair. But again, that is easily fixed. There's plenty of room for sports with a minor upgrade of the facilities. This space available has been expanded on by correspondence from your review by neighbor David Forlow. I think you've got a letter from David regarding that space. The conference examples slide.
Which slide are you referring to? Mr. Swan?
Conference examples, right there. I have looked at these pictures and I don't see any houses in these pictures. It does not appear that these courts are in a residential area. Nicole is proposing a sports court in a residential neighborhood. I visited the Deer Path School and their court is behind the school, adjacent to the parking lot and adjacent to Park District property. There are no homes there. If I could have the slide that shows the courts and the diagram of the courts and such. That's good enough. You don't seem to be able to come up with exactly how many basketball hoops are going to be. One proposal is 1 to 6. Now this is 3. We kind of need to know how many it's going to be so we can figure out the noise. The 4 corners of the court, what actually are these going to be used for? Are they going to be used for badminton, or are they lined so that people can come with their pickleball courts and use these courts? There is no way putting a sign up on the fencing that says you can't use these courts is going to work, unless you've got somebody stationed there 24 hours a day. It's my understanding from looking at these courts as best as I can read the dimensions, there are dimensions for pickleball courts. And I'm concerned that they're planning to come back in the spring, say during spring vacation, around or a later date, ask you to allow pickleball and lights. It's just too obvious that those are sized exactly for pickleball. And I'd like to know how we can be assured that they will not make that ask. Placement of the courts. Nicole says the green space is the best placement for the court, and she has looked at the other 3 areas. However, she does not provide any proof of that statement. We have never heard from the architect or contractor for this project. I spoke with the soil testing firm and was advised that they were only to test the green space. That leads me to believe that no other areas were seriously looked at. In my opinion, the green space is the least desirable. The noise from the courts will travel directly into the residential neighborhood. The north lot is a better location because the blacktop is new, can easily be striped, and the noise would travel mostly to the north into the park. The current west recess area would be the ideal spot. The noise would travel to the west. The railroad tracks are there, somewhat to the north towards Sheridan Road and the park. The area needs to be refurbished. The PTO money could come in handy providing the court and refurbishing the area. Under the standards for the RIO, Section D standards, no development plan shall be approved by the Board of Trustees, and the Joint Plan Commission and zoning boards of appeals shall not recommend approval or RIO development plan unless the applicant shall establish that a RIO development plan meets the following standards that each may be applicable. Number 1, under general standards, development in accordance with the RIO development plan will not have a substantial or undue effect upon an adjacent property, the character of the area, or the public health, safety, and general welfare. Obviously, a sports court open dawn to dusk is going to have a substantial undue effect upon the adjacent properties. Number 5, landscaping and open space. The RIO development plan provides for landscaping, public open space, and other buffering. Features to minimize the visual impact of the development and to protect uses within the development and surrounding areas. Although the neighborhood was told there would be landscaping, the landscaping plan provided by Nicole consists of grass seed. Do they intend to have the grass grow tall? Additionally, the landscape plan calls for the removal of arborvitae, which was not maintained by the school and allowed to die. Will new arborvitae be planted to replace these that were removed? When will they be planted, and will they be maintained this time around? The former superintendent, who was an advocate for the neighborhood, had those planted to soften the side of the chiller. The draft ordinance. The following must be included in the draft ordinance: prohibiting pickleball, prohibiting lights, hours operation, as originally presented to the neighborhood, school hours only, school days only. Landscaping should include planting as well as grass seed. No amplification of any kind to include music, bullhorns, outdoor speakers. In conclusion, I'd like to ask the board to firmly deny this application, and I would submit the residents deserve to be protected from, among other things, removing 10 to 15% or more of the green space. Obviously, putting down a plastic surface in a place of green grass is not in good environmental practice, certainly not a teaching moment for middle school students. Noise and our quality of life need to be observed. Loss of property values. We received info from a local longtime real estate agent that this will lower our real estate values. Finally, thank you very much. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Yes.
Hello, I'm Christine Claywater. I live at 130 East Sheridan Place, right across from the green space. I understand the concerns that the neighbors have, and I understand the needs of the school. I would like to address the potential noise issue that this project may present. We've had an issue in the past that took years to resolve, and that was of the noise that was emitted from the chiller and traveled across that green space so that all the neighbors could hear. And it literally took years to get the school board to fix that issue. It required an interim superintendent to address that issue before it was finally fixed. But as Nicole emphasized, this sport court will be placed very close to the school. In fact, right up close to the chiller as it exists right now. There will be the potential for multiple basketballs, multiple other balls, plus children's noise, which I think all the neighbors accept. It's a play area. We want them to have fun. But we also want to preserve some quality of life for the residents that live around the school. And I would like to see an official acoustical analysis where a professional comes in and can tell us just how much noise can be expected to be emitted from a play area like what is being proposed. What may bounce off that chiller and reverberate, travel across a green space to the homes that are surrounding the school. I think until there is an official analysis of that, I don't think anybody can really say what the neighbors will experience. And one of the standards that is required by the petitioner is that they address whether there will be a substantial adverse effect. They don't really address that one way or the other in their response. They describe the benefit to the children and to the mental health of the students, and that it will provide for activities for the general public. But they don't address that one particular question. Will there or will there not be a substantial or undue adverse effect upon adjacent property? They don't address it. And I think that's important for them to address, but I don't really think that they can, because all they can do is to speculate. There'll be some noise. Well, how much noise? How far will it carry? How will it affect the property owners? How will it affect people if this is open at dawn, which is a vague time and up to interpretation? As one of you suggested or commented, dawn in the middle of summer is at 5:30 in the morning. We just want to make sure that if this is something that is coming to across the street, we want it done right. We want it done with the proper kind of analysis so that if there are problems, landscaping may take on greater importance than beyond just aesthetics. But I do think that the aesthetics are important as well. We'll be looking at 3 basketball hoops across the street. And while they say that there won't be any visibility of the court per se from the sidewalks, you know, we'll have those basketball hoops to look at. Basketballs also make a lot of noise bouncing off of basketball hoops. And they make a reverberating sound, a thud. Landscaping could help, you know, solve that issue. So I would like to see not only an acoustical analysis, I'd like to see that any signage limited with actual times. The court cannot be open before 8 a.m. That it can't be open, I don't know, perhaps past 8 or 9 in the evening. That's a suggestion that the village would have to determine. But I think that this is something that has to be taken into consideration. It's no small issue for the residents that live around the school. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Andy Duran. I'm at 454 Rockland Avenue. I'm also president of the Board of Education for District 65. I've been on the board for almost 4 years now. Wasn't going to speak tonight, and I unfortunately have to leave shortly to go pick up 3 Lake Bluff Middle School students from the high school. So I'm going to go ahead and speak just because I want to clarify a couple things that have been said tonight. Number one, I want to thank Nicole for the work she's done. This is not a community that should bully volunteers like Nicole, who have done an amazing job as a volunteer parent to bring a resource to our kids that will cost taxpayers nothing. So I just want to make sure that that's said publicly. Nicole, from the board's perspective, from a parent perspective, I greatly appreciate it. Number two, I want to thank the school admins, many of which have had evening events every night this week, but showed up tonight to be here to support our kids, who have worked tirelessly to support our kids in many ways, and who have actually thought really carefully and thoughtfully about this plan and this project. Many of the questions you've asked tonight have been questions that have come up in these meetings, and there's nobody that knows our schools better, our buildings better, and our students better than 3 of these people sitting right here in the front. So thank you to that. About 4 things I want to clarify from previous comments. Number one, about the green space percentage. It's always been 7%. 93% of the space remains, as you, Ms. Dale, I can't read, I don't have my glasses, so I'm sorry, as you mentioned. It's never been 10 to 15%, as you've heard. 7%, 7.1 I think is the exact one. So 93% of that green space will remain, which is 93% more than it was before that school was torn down. We're not removing 10 to 15% of the green space. Number two, the landscaping plan calls for more than just grass seed. If you look at the packet carefully, the landscaping plan has been presented publicly on at least 3 different occasions, including tonight. So if you're wondering if it's just grass seed or something else, I suggest you read it again. Literally the same slides used tonight were the ones that were used at the ABR meeting, were the ones that were used at the Board of Education meeting with some additions, with the only difference tonight being the addition of the paved path that Mr. Tanner so generously thought to include. So the same slides, there's nothing sinister here. The same slides that were used at the ABR are the same slides that are used tonight. So I just want to make sure that's clarified. I was at both meetings. Ms. Sorensen, you made a great point about being a neighbor of the school. And that's something I do take seriously. I'm not in your neighborhood, but I'm certainly a neighbor, right? And I do feel like when you live near a school, I used to live next door to a school, so I get it. You know what you're getting into, right? The comments from neighbors previously were about pickleball and about the noise. I get it. That's loud. Pickleball's loud. Nicole and the PTO have compromised there. No pickleball. So now tonight the conversation switches to basketball, which is not nearly as noisy and is frequently happening around our town anyway. It's about the sound of a lawnmower. If you go study the decibel level, that's about what you get. We have those on our streets every day, right? The last commenter was right about the noise being speculative. Even if there was an acoustic study, the noise would be speculative. But here's what I love about Lake Bluff, and here's what I love about being a neighbor. This community is about kids. It always has been, it is now, and I hope it always will be. When we're young, and we have young kids at home, we protect our kids by doing a variety of things in our environment, right? That's because the environment's about the kids, and we're willing to accept temporary and minor inconveniences to support our kids. And I think that's the point, is that this community has been about kids, is about kids, and while some may carry that burden more than others because they're neighbors of the school or whatnot, I believe that the minor inconveniences, which is what I believe this will be, to support our kids is of utmost importance. And I'm confident that the Planning Commission and the Zoning Board will see that and agree that this community is about our kids. Finally, I've been to all those other schools, every single one of them that was on that list through my work. In fact, 2 of the 4 schools on that list I've been to in the past 4 weeks. While you can't see the houses on there, and at least 2 of the schools on that list, the homes are even closer to where a sport court is on those campuses. So if you haven't had a chance to drive through those schools and to see them, it might be a good exercise. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Mr.
Mr. Russell?
Andy, before you run away, you did make one statement of fact that I don't see in my packet. Where is the landscape plan that shows more than grass?
The landscape in the.
Where is it?
I assume that was in tonight. I came in late. That was in the one for the ABR, wasn't it, Nicole? Wasn't there about the height of the? Yeah.
This one?
Thank you. So this is directly quoted.
Forgive me, can you speak at the microphone, please? Thank you.
That would help. Sorry. So the bullet points were taken directly from that, and I think he is referencing the fact that there's the topsoil, the grade machine, in the effort to fully enhance the grass area around it is essentially what it is.
Correct, so it's just lawn restoration, there's not a, just to clarify.
more than
I thought
grass
I thought I missed it in my
Or the
packet.
grass
but-
seed was my point. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Matt Winston, 190 Norwich Court. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. Wanted to first just start off, again, a big thank you to Nicole and all the work, recognizing this is volunteer work. And I think any inference of any...
Excuse me, can you make the microphone?
Any inference of any intentional deception, any wrongdoing, we're talking about bringing a sports court to a middle school. I can totally understand that there needs to be a constructive conversation regarding that there's many sides, but I think to put it in perspective, we're trying to put a sports court in a middle school for kids, for a community. I think that's something that's important. I think just, to me, that this is very thought out. I think there's a lot of detail that went into this, a lot of consideration that went into this. I think it's a silver lining of COVID. I think all of us that have gone through and experienced now have a new appreciation. So when we've gone through and talk about the location and can a little bit here or there make a difference, it can. I think that's something that myself as a parent with 2 kids in the Lake Bluff school system have a newly founded appreciation for, is outdoor activity, being able to have the opportunity for socialization, and a little can go a very, very long way. And I think in a community as tight-knit as Lake Bluff, I've been absolutely amazed at the number of people since my family and I have moved here that either grew up here and had the opportunity to remain here or left and were able to come back. And so I also look at this not only as an investment in the current middle school and the students that are going to be attending, I see it as an investment in the community, because these are ultimately going to be future residents, future families, future citizens of Lake Bluff. I'd also like to point out that was brought up in the presentation when it comes to noise. So I do agree that noise is going to be something that is a very relative term, and it's a very relative thing to assess. One thing that was pointed out is that area of the school isn't currently used due to the fact that there's staff shortages for proper and adequate, safe observation of the students during playtime. So as it stands right now, I think if that area was even opened up and you saw a majority of students on that side, because if those staff shortages went away, that you would find there would be already an increase as it stands in noise. I can tell you from having grown up in Boulder, Colorado, across the street from an elementary school, just as close as at least is depicted here, my entire life, as well as after leaving, having my parents be able to maintain the house there, that it was always a great central area to be able to be around in middle school, and added a lot to the community, and was actually considered a coveted area to live. I'd also like to bring up, it was a statement was made earlier, you don't have to drive far to look for a basketball hoop in Lake Bluff. Well, then that's great. So then there won't be a need for a bunch of people to convene in this area to play if there's already these different areas that can be utilized by the public as this stays focused more for the students. I think it's great that everyone can, again, come together and can have a thoughtful, and I think can have a constructive conversation. And ultimately, I think that this has been a very well thought out plan, and is something that I believe is going to be a significant addition and a significant positive factor for not only the students that are at the middle school, but also for the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Any other?
Good evening, Matt Beckley, 321 Vincent Court. Real quick, I'm not going to reiterate anything that you've heard already. I think what I've heard is, and you all deal with this as a zoning board, it's best of intentions balanced with unintended consequences. I think all of my neighbors are very concerned about unintended consequences of something that's probably, I mean, hugely beneficial. I've got two very young kids. I play in that field all the time, especially in summer when it's light out after dinner. Probably going to use the sport court just the same way, if it's there. What I would say, and it's been mentioned, I think it was in the packet, is just lighting. As far as unintended consequences, I know it's not in the plan now, but as we've seen, someone could donate money 5 years from now and say, hey, there's a sport court, need some lights. So I would just say, if we had the opportunity now to just put that in writing, whatever your recommendation is to the village board, it says, hey, this thing can never be lit up in any way, shape, or form. I think we just have that chance now. It solves a lot of issues that won't take years to undo potentially down the road. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from the public? Mr. Tanner.
Again, John Tanner, 115 East Witchwood. Because I've been working on this PATH program, I had a chance to work with the administration at the school and also with Nicole. And I'd have to say that, you know, it's been fun working with them, and really impressed, if you will, with their dedication. And that's part of what has made this community such a great community. We've been here for over 44 years, 4 kids, 2 grandkids through the school, and it's been a great place for everybody to be. And I think this is just another good addition, and really feel grateful for the dedication of the people working on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tanner. Okay. Ms. Elliott, maybe we'll have you take the mic again, and we'll have a few follow-up questions.
Sure.
Pickleball, as I understand it, is absolutely eliminated,
It is eliminated.
and lights are absolutely eliminated.
Lights are absolutely eliminated.
And the basketball hoops, well, the placement might change, but
So-
you'd probably go with 3.
Right. The idea and just, the understanding of the process is that, this is our proposal and this is how we intended it to be, but if there is feedback that requires modification, we can make modifications, but there was no desire to have greater than 3, based on the understanding of what would be an optimal size, not to infringe upon too much green space.
And then there's been discussion with respect to limitation of hours.
Yes.
For example, a signage that reflects not being available or
Yes.
accessible before 8 o'clock.
Yes,
That's certainly reasonable, isn't it?
it's very reasonable.
Okay. And there was some discussion about possibly working with the Park District and having the proposed court placed in Artesian Park. That would require the kids to walk across Sheridan Place.
It would require crossing the street and extra time that would take away from recess.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Elliott?
And again, no plans at this point for fencing around it or anything, right?
No, initially that was thought it could potentially be a greater eyesore than
Yes.
benefit.
Yeah.
So that was, the question was raised as we had discussions about it, but that was the initial thought and why it hasn't been additionally considered.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. Deliberation from the board, by the board. Who wants to start?
I guess I will. George, go ahead.
You beat me by a half a second.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I think, I'm struggling with this, but I think overall that providing an improved, safer play surface for the kids to play basketball, for the kids to play foursquare, on the west side of this green space, close to the existing school building, is a reasonable proposal. This is a school-owned property. There is going to be noise associated with children. I do not think half-court pickup basketball games by 6 to 8 kids at a hoop is going to generate a huge amount of noise, certainly way under what we all put up with every day with the leaf blowers all around our community.
Knew that was coming.
I do hope that the committee does look at the plan for the placement of those goals, though. It makes no sense to me to put posts right in the middle of this fairly small-size sport court and dramatically reduce the safety of alternative games that can be played during recess and physical education. It just, to me, it baffles me why you would not want the 3 posts around the perimeter so that you can use the court for other organized activities during the school day. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Okay, Mr. Miller?
I feel, based on the presentation, that this is a positive, not only for the school, but for the community. I think having the sport court at the middle school is the perfect place. Unfortunately, it's the place that is most disruptive to the neighbors. And I feel there's definite reasons why it can't be placed elsewhere, and that are legitimate reasons. Noise is always a problem anytime you're around the school. I do believe there should be restricted hours, whether it's from 8 to dusk or 8 to 6 or 5. I think that should be posted. I think there should be plans in the future for a fence, should it be required to keep the people out at off hours. I don't think that's not an unreasonable request, but not mandated at this time. I believe we will put verbiage about lights and pickleball in there. And I think, again, it's a benefit for the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
I would just reiterate that this is school property, and we are here for our children. And in my backyard, somebody built a pickleball court and a basketball, and they have a light. And it didn't come to me. Wasn't aware of it. And guess what? It's not that loud. And I have to remind myself that there's a lot of joy in having those children outside playing. And I remind myself every time for that. I would not encourage a fence. I just think they're unsightly. And I think children, just the vantage point of anything, perhaps we could encourage more landscaping. And I think landscaping go a long way to even field a ball from rolling off, and could help maybe the site plans for the neighbors as well. So, and the hours of just maybe school hours, and obviously not dawn to dusk, but I'm sure you'd be reasonable to allow a proper time that we all can agree on. But, you know, there was a school there. There was a lot more impervious surface. And I'm also encouraged to think that that whole drop-off station to get cars off, and really to sort of plan B to encourage a better flow, would be really lovely to see in our community. You know, you go by that Sheridan School and, oh my gosh, just even navigating through what they have to endure. I think there could be a win-win on this change, also allowing something else to be positive. So, yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Danley. Ms. Fisher?
First off, it did really help a lot, Mr. Blackmire. Thank you for explaining what the other plans or other constraints or future plans and everything. You know, that certainly made it more understandable why the west side couldn't as readily be endorsed or such. You know, and I agree with everyone who's saying that it definitely is an asset to the community and everything. And again, I just hope that we're also all working together on this. You know, I just don't want to feel like we're the bad guys that are sitting here judging and such, because I think the goal of the zoning committee is to look at things on everybody's oversight, sort of. So I think if we have questions and such, you know, hopefully that we're all on the same team ultimately. You know, we all want the good for Lake Bluff. So I think sometimes there are hard questions, and you know, it's not to put anybody on the defensive, certainly. So I think the intent is just to look at everything, and you usually end up with a better product. So I agree with a lot of the things that have been said about hours and, you know, restrictions for the future and unintended consequences that we'd like to stop now so we don't have to deal with them later when everybody's in agreement on that. So, you know, that's kind of where I am. So I'd be in favor with all of this and as much landscaping as we can put at it to help on some of those other issues.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Ms. Sorensen?
Oh, I'm up. I think I want to thank Ms. Elliott and Mr. Tanner for your time and your gracious offer. And I also want to thank my neighbors. It's nice to see you here. I think that I do believe this is a positive for the school, and I understand the purposes in locating it to the east side, not the west side. Let me get my cardinal directions going. I do think that we need to keep under consideration the items that we've talked through this evening. Just limit the use of this and don't encourage it. I wouldn't add a fence, because sometimes that only encourages people to see what they can do with that fence. And again, as a neighbor, I've seen encroachment upon the middle school at different hours. So I will simply echo my point, and this goes directly to my experience as a long-term neighbor of these neighbors, that landscaping should be a part of this consideration in the event that the noise becomes something that is untenable. And it also would simply make the space more attractive. There are just, there's nothing native growing there. There are a lot of dying trees, and we could make it prettier, which would go a long way toward everyone's mental health as well. So thank you for all your time this evening. I know it's running late.
Yeah, I guess, thank you, Ms. Elliott, for your hard work and your contributions to give rise to this particular proposal, and thank Mr. Tanner also for his very gracious contribution to this project. And thank the public for coming out and trying to address this issue, because it is an important issue. Like Mr. Winston, I grew up across from a elementary school and a park that had tennis courts and a basketball court and everything else, and even lights. And I thought it was a tremendous asset to just have that sort of space, that sort of activity, that sort of, recreational facilities right in your backyard, or in my case, it was my front yard. And so I'm a strong proponent of this particular proposal, with the caveat that we do have to address that pickleball issue, and I think that's a given. That we do have to prohibit lights, and I think that's a given, and that we do have to have appropriate signage. One question that I have is with the badminton courts and that risk that people could bring their portable pickleball nets. I don't know how we handle that. Obviously signage will help, but I guess you'll have to weigh whether or not the badminton court is critically important, and I can't comment on that, but there's a mechanism by which pickleball could be prohibited at some point if it became a problem. But I think it's an excellent proposal for the village, for the school board, for the school district, and for the kids and even young adults of Lake Bluff. Thank you.
I might add how fortunate we are as a community that the scofflaws we're concerned about are pickleball players. Maybe a bad joke, but
Good point.
there could be worse things out there. And I trust that everyone will speak up about that noise.
Any further deliberation? Yes, sir.
I have a recommendation. So in your packet is a proposed ordinance. In it, there are conditions of approval. And there's been a lot of different things that have been thrown out by different commissioners. So if the recommendation, if somebody wants to make a motion to recommend approval, subject to conditions, that's fine, but I think you should all try to make clear what that's going to look like, because we want whatever recommendation comes out of this body to be clear. So right now, as the ordinance is drafted, there are actually 5 main conditions, several of which are the standard ones that are pretty much in every approval that you grant. So one of which is the approvals granted pursuant to this ordinance do not authorize the development, construction, reconstruction, alteration, demolition, and so forth, until they follow the codes and get permits. So this ordinance alone does obviously not grant the actual commencement of construction. That's a standard one. Two, compliance with plans. So the ordinance will include the plans, and they must construct the sports court in accordance with the plans, and they can't do any major modifications that are going to alter that, those plans. Standard. Compliance with applicable law. Also a standard one that we have in every one. You know, if they're using the sports courts for things that are not permitted under a code, violate noise ordinances, go down the list, property maintenance issues, you know, that would be an issue. I think what, the next one is the one that I think warrants at least some direction from this body. And there's kind of two subparts to it, and it's the sports court-specific use restrictions, one of which is the hours. Currently drafted, it says a sports court shall not be used by LBSD 65, its students, employees, guests, or the public from sunset each day until sunrise the following morning. So before we go on there, if you want to discuss what you think the hours should be as a condition, if it's sunset, nothing after sunset and not until sunrise. 8 a.m. was discussed, but that's something you may want to discuss. The other piece of that on hours was signage. So there's two aspects of it, one of which is we can enforce the zoning ordinance and not require signage, or we could require signage. We could add to this, if this is the recommendation of the body, a sign shall be installed posting the permitted hours of use of the sports court, which sign shall be approved by the village manager. So they could work on with, or the village administrator. The idea is that the applicant can work on the messaging, the positioning of the sign and so forth, but the village would make sure that it's compliant with your wishes.
Can I just interrupt? It also was mentioned about no pickleball per se on the sign.
So I will get to that.
Okay, sorry.
The next condition, and we can talk about these all at once if you'd like, is it states for activities, the use of the sports court for sports involving hard plastic balls, including without limitation pickleball, is prohibited. So if the court is regularly being used by pickleball, it would be a violation of this ordinance. Now, it currently is drafted, does not include anything about the sign, but if you would like that language added to the sign, that could be your recommendation. So I'll just say the last condition is just that the basketball hoops in the west parking lot must be removed. So that's is the final condition. So I'll leave it to this body to deliberate and see if there's any consensus on conditions. I don't know, Glenn, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, so one note too, they aren't conditions, but in a sense they are, and this is really stylistic. If you go up, there's this section about restricted improvements. One part of that is on the books already, which says that the school won't plant fruit-bearing trees, nut-bearing trees. The other part just says that, you know, the school has to come back to add lighting. And this is really, I'll mention stylistic, right? If you put in there shall be no lighting of the sport court, the process to change that is the school district comes back and says, please change my plan. If you say the school district has to come back and say, please change my plan, you know, it's the same process, it's the same outcome. Just stylistically, there are infinitely many things that you aren't allowed to do without coming here first, so.
Right, and so thank you, Glenn, for noting that. So it's the artificial lighting of the sports court. They would not be allowed to do that unless they came back to this body. The other one that's in here is that the planting of any trees, landscape materials which bear or produce nuts, fruits, and other materials which could be used as projectiles or otherwise present a safety hazard. So if they wanted to plant those, they'd have to come back and present a plan and address that.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Any further discussion on the conditions?
Well, can we just make sure that it's not like a temporary sign that never goes away? You know, like, it would have to have a signage that's approved through the ABR. Aren't they responsible for sort of signage to be appropriately scale and how that, you know, permanent, not just a temporary sign? So how, we would have to go through
So you could do
the
this-
proper channels to get a,
So you could do this a couple ways.
Signage.
One of which we could certainly put in the word permanent. That is not a problem in the condition. The second, and Glenn, and I'll look to you, because you probably know this slightly better than I do, is would it require for the sign to be in place to go back to the ABR?
There's, I forget where exactly the line is, but there's a certain square footage at which you can just put the sign up, and then there's at a larger, I think it's 2 square feet, I'm not sure, like, let's say no parking or this way or exit only, you don't have to come through for every sign, but most signs you'd have to.
Right. And as I mentioned before, one recommendation might be that it would have to be approved by the village administrator. So that way, if it's something that doesn't meet a village standard or what, the village would be looking at it.
yeah, we just have a lot of temporary signs still up in, our
Right.
village that,
But we can certainly put permanent,
Need to be better.
that's not a problem.
I would like the verbiage of the signage to absolutely include the text, no pickleball. Because people aren't gonna know what's in the ordinance. And if you have a sign there, it gives the police department the ability to enforce it clearly without memorizing the ordinance. And then also the time, permitted time should be posted, not just in the ordinance, on the signs.
Any discussion?
With the, well, I'm struggling with the cutoff time, but I think 8 AM is a reasonable time, or possibly 8 AM on weekdays, 9 AM on weekends.
Okay, and any end time? I mean, does it go through dusk? Or, because that could be, 9 o'clock? Or does it go,
Just trying to envision when there's a field hockey game going on or other activities going on, none of that starts before 8 AM or 9 AM. But all these evening events, there's siblings that come along, there's a basketball court right there. To not say while these games are going on, you can't be shooting baskets, I guess if I were king, I'd go 8 AM to dusk. Because I think there's gonna be many times when there are many kids with events in the bigger open area. And it's just one of the things right now that youth do is shoot the ball in the basket. And to try and regulate that, it doesn't seem feasible on the evening side. That's my opinion.
the other thing we haven't discussed in the summertime is the baseball fields. They are quite noisy, and they've been here since the beginning, so I'm not sure this is gonna add that much in summertime to the outdoor noise that's already out there.
Well, it might be amplified if kids come over and now they have something that they can bounce balls on. 'Cause-
Rather than hitting the ball, I suppose. Nothing. So dusk would be the 8 AM to dusk, or 9 AM to dusk?
Yeah, at 8 AM, Monday through Friday, and 9 AM weekends.
Okay.
And I think I'm hearing from the board that everyone thinks there should be some landscape improvements beyond just grass. And so I think, can our motion then include a strong recommendation that additional landscaping be developed? Something to that effect? We can't develop the plan this evening.
No.
I guess I would say,
So you can say it's contingent upon additional landscaping. You can say that it's highly recommended. It's your recommendation, any way you'd like to phrase it. And certainly that'll be conveyed to the village board. And oftentimes applicants will address these issues between this meeting and when it goes to the board. But that's your prerogative to come up with whatever recommendation and what landscaping means, whether it's placement in certain areas, whether it's certain types of, it's what you think is appropriate.
and I would encourage you to be a bit specific about that, I suppose. I mean, I think I've heard some members talk about or be thinking about perhaps the arborvitae that were discussed in that proposal, and then some discussion of the trees south by Circle, and then some discussion of really entirely new landscaping, either, you know, it could be around the court itself, it could be around the entire former East School site. I mean, you don't have to be exact, but just, I would be clear on what you have in mind.
Well, I think it has to be relatively finite, because the proposal is a relatively finite part of the parcel. I don't know how we quantify that, but
I don't think I would think it would be cost prohibitive to put plantings around the whole green space, I think.
Right.
Probably not practical. So it would be around the sport court, and whether it's an obligatory thing or a consideration in the future, that's something we should decide on, or at least recommend.
Well, my perspective would be that it is as much aesthetics, but also not necessarily around the literal sport court, but to provide some screening for the noise. Maybe a little bit for sightlines as well. But I'm thinking again about the neighbors and the previous experience with the chiller that was referenced, and that was, I think that's why a lot of folks are here. That was a long experience, and it was truly excruciating. So I
So
can.
we put in a recommendation that a landscaping plan be developed within a certain time frame.
If we say develop, does that mean it will be carried out, right? I'm not sure
We
how
say-
far to go with this.
You say they must be landscaped within a year of building the sport court.
Something to bear in mind too. I mean, it's, you know, in Lake Bluff, we don't have a whole lot of like buffer yard requirements. In other communities, there's some real guidance about how much depth and how opaque and so on. That's not something we commonly require here. But I say that to say, you know, screening goes both ways. So if you're worried about this being, let's say, an attractive nuisance, partially it's in your interest to make sure that it can be seen if it's being used improperly.
Mm-hmm.
We don't necessarily want a barrier fence. We'd want some kind of landscaping that just cuts down on the noise.
Softens the noise, softens I would ask the neighbors, but softens the noise. You know, that's been my experience in the neighborhood.
As far as the school, would that be something of consideration for us to recommend that? And would that be something you would be interested in pursuing? Do you have the budget for something like that? This is another question.
That is the question, because, and I wasn't meaning, how much,
I understand that, but is there some money in the budget if there was some thought of landscaping?
there was some money in the budget.
Because you can, put bushes around, but it doesn't have to be dense, just to cut the noise.
We can have a discussion too of, what is reasonable of PTO.
Ms. Elliott, if you could get up to the mic, please, just make a record
I keep
for the.
forgetting to do that. That would need to be something assessed and costed out in terms of, and when you're saying landscaping, I'm assuming you're meaning trees, and so is there a recommend?
Bushes,
Yeah.
trees.
What is the specific recommendation so that we can cost it out and understand how that could be funded? I think that is definitely a consideration and one that we were expecting. It's just, what is the exact?
Well, I think you go back to Mariani and say, we want to put up a buffer for noise. What do you suggest? They're the experts. And then see what the,
Yeah, and I think it is important too, the point you made about sightlines, because in the feedback that we got from the police department, they wanted to ensure that there was appropriate sightlines for supervision of the court by their routine drive-bys. So it has to be that balance.
So some recommendations. There's a couple ways you can do this, one of which is, and we'll leave it to you all to decide from a timing perspective how this works. It is not uncommon you can always continue this and say, come back And when you come back, let's do please submit a revised landscape plan, and they can work with Mariani or whoever, and formulate something for this body to look at. If it's something that you don't think it's necessary to come back to this body and you want to move this on to the board, you can also recommend that prior to going to the board for final approval, that they present a revised landscape plan that includes more buffering for noise. But again, that's your prerogative on what you'd like to see.
Well, in practical terms, we have a board before us that recommended they didn't need any landscaping. And now we're recommending that they do need some supplemental landscaping. So I think we should just convey that we cannot develop a specific landscape plan tonight. And I think we should just send the message to the village board that the zoning board and plan commission feels there should be supplemental landscaping developed. And then let them decide, if we're just a recommending body anyway, let them decide whether or not it needs to go back to the ABR where it really should go. If the village board feels there should be if they concur with us, then they can send it back to the ABR for development of the plan. That's their area of expertise.
To move this along, maybe you should start contacting Mariani or whoever you want and just come up with a plan with the anticipation, and 'cause eventually I think that's gonna probably happen anyway.
Any other proposed conditions? I guess with respect to the landscaping, one of the concerns I have is that you're gonna start to go into more and more of the green space. And I guess secondly, you've got Artesian Park across the road, and there's a tremendous amount of open space there and a tremendous amount of positive noise coming out of there with baseball and tennis and, hockey in the winter. So there's always gonna be a little bit of noise, background noise associated with a good usage of the park or the court or whatever.
And that's completely valid. The Park District, though, is farther away than this will be to some of the closest neighbors. And certainly the newest house along the Park District property has certainly put up a strong row of evergreens, and I'm sure that's an attempt to screen. But again, that's Park District, so this is the school that we're speaking of, and closer to the neighbors and neighborhood houses. So.
Should we make a proposal?
Certainly.
There's a lot of pieces to this.
There are a lot.
Can you?
Yep, so let me help you formulate a motion. And this is your motion, so feel free to modify anything I say. But the motion would be to recommend approval of the application pursuant to the draft ordinance that is in your packet, subject to the following additions or changes. That the hours of the sports court shall not be used by LBSD 65, its students, employees, and guests that are the public, from sunset, though the word dusk was used, I don't know, sunset I assume is fine, each day until 8 a.m. on weekdays and 9 a.m. on weekends. That a sign shall be installed posting the permitted hours of use of the sports court, which sign shall be approved, permanent sign shall be approved by the village administrator. That the use of the sports court for sports involving hard pickled or plastic balls, including without limitation pickleball, is prohibited, and such restriction shall be listed on the sign. And that this body recommends that a landscape plan that includes buffering and to address noise shall be submitted and be included in any final approval by the village board.
Should we add no lights at any time? Did you say
Yes.
that on there?
So So that's, I think, in here already.
Okay.
It states that, you know, that they'd have to come back for permission
Okay.
to add any, it would be a major modification that require this body to look at for any artificial lighting of the sports court,
Good.
whether by adding new fixtures or by modifying existing fixtures.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Approve.
That's your motion?
That's my motion.
Second? Ms.
Second.
Fisher? Any further discussion? If we could vote, please?
Certainly. Member Fisher,
Yes.
Member Danley,
Yes.
Member Miller,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Member Sorensen,
Aye.
Chair Peters.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next steps.
Yeah, so, you know, holidays interrupts the village board's regular meeting cycle. This would typically come to the village board on Monday, January 9th. You know, there is an architectural board of review meeting there in between. It's possible, depending on the school district's timing, you know, who knows how much work gets done over the holidays, but, you know, something may end up at that body as well.
Okay. And thank you again, Ms. Elliott and your team, and Mr. Tanner for your generosity in making the court and the path an opportunity. All right. Lost my cheat sheet. All right, agenda item number 8, discussion regarding historic preservation zoning incentives.
Yeah, so just as a brief update, as we talked about at our last meeting, our last joint workshop with the HPC, you know, working towards bringing you some options for zoning incentives about floor area ratio, right? And giving a bonus potentially to designated landmarks as an additional incentive to landmark. Also, you know, the village board did approve this body's recommendations about a new Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 4. They did take out and remand back that provision about a rebuttable presumption for variations. I think some members of the board may have just wanted to take a closer look at the language, and some members may have been uncomfortable with how far that incentive went. So you'll have the chance to discuss those both at your next meeting. Again, at one point, we expected this would be a longer agenda. We expected quite a few other items to be on here, and so a little unfortunate that we couldn't quite take advantage of having a one-item agenda, but at the same time, it's 9:20, and you've certainly have had a deliberative meeting. So stay tuned for that at your January meeting.
All right, agenda item number 9, proposed meeting dates for 2023. I think they were included in the packet. I think they reflected third Wednesday in all instances, but it may be December.
Yeah, so this is the whole village board, advisory board meeting schedule for next year. We take the regular dates of each body, we adjust them slightly for civil and religious holidays as best as we can. In this case, for this body, the only adjustment is the same as this year, just on December, in December, moving that back up to the 14th. I think that still falls within Hanukkah. I think we weren't able to find a date that would avoid that.
Don't worry about it.
And so,
Not a big deal.
yeah.
It's a minor holidays.
Yeah, but I like the dreidel.
You like your dreidel?
I like the dreidel. No.
I'd see no reason why not to bring dreidel here to the dais. It's probably a great service.
Do we need a motion?
Yes.
Yes.
We would appreciate that.
Voice vote is fine.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Agenda item number 10, staff report.
No further report, Mr. Chairman.
Agenda item number 11, commissioners report.
Can I just ask one question? What was the decision last night on the HPC about 1 Moffett? Was there a decision? I didn't watch that meeting.
What about Moffett?
Yes. So, 1 Moffett Road was recently purchased by an adjacent property owner. They filed to demolish that property, which does have some historical significance in the village. It's not a designated landmark. The HPC started their review of that in November and then chose to keep that open for 30 days. Ultimately, yesterday, they decided 5-0 to end their review. They didn't proceed to designate it as a landmark, and so a demolition permit can be pulled for that
Can be
property.
issued.
Sooner or later, that actually will have to come before this body. They'll need to subdivide as part of what they're doing. It's technically, it started out as 2 lots, which was really 1 buildable lot. Because they're a neighboring property, now they have 3 lots, which is really 1 lot, and they need to get back to 2. So you'll see that at a future meeting. I would bet probably could be anywhere between, no earlier than March, but they may wait until they're further along in their demolition to come before you.
Thank you.
Is it a neighbor to the north or a neighbor to the west?
It's the neighbor to the west, actually.
In the cul-de-sac.
Right at the circle?
Yeah.
The new house, I think.
Yes. So it is, put it up right here on the screen, actually. So this is the owner in question, the Aherns at 525 Cambridge. 0 Cambridge in between is part of essentially 1 Moffett. They're 2 lots, but they're really just 1 for reasons we don't have to get into. And now that they're all owned in common, they're all substandard lots, they function as 1 lot. We understand their intent will be they'll draw a line somewhere around here. They may have a flag or just a driveway easement or something, and that you'll essentially have a large western lot, a large eastern lot, and some mechanism here in the middle that'll keep it unbuildable. They're looking at a conservation easement. I understand that they have retained an attorney to look at those options, but one way or another, something they intend to have something at this point to keep it just 2 lots.
So it'll still remain 1 lakefront lot.
That's the understanding, yes.
That will change?
Or no, that there will just, it'll just be this 1 lot
Right.
at the lakefront, potentially plus,
Okay.
some of this land going west.
Okay,
And
thank
they
you.
have, premature to look at them, but they have some, actually, I think I have them right here. They do have like a site plan they've been developing as well. If this works. This doesn't show, the ultimate lot lines, but this is something like what they're planning. A lot of tree preservation, restoration to like a meadow type of landscape through much of the lot, and then really shrinking the size of the existing house, the footprint of it for their new house. Amusingly enough, this is actually a pickleball court.
Of course.
Of course, some raised planting beds, and this is actually part of the original house that would be relocated to serve as similar to what they did on their own property last time. They took part of the house as a historic barn and have made it kind of a gathering place, party barn, accessory structure, what have you. Kind of repeating the same over here.
I need a party barn.
Great, well, thank you.
Quite welcome.
Thank you.
Any news on Sheridan Road?
Sheridan Road, we did, I hope I remembered to report this last month. We are looking at it. It is IDOT road. We keep asking them about it, and there's no plans to repave it at this time. So the state's, capital improvement plans go out about, I think, probably 4 or 5 years from now. And it's not in there in that period of time.
That road's not gonna be a road.
But I don't know how much longer past. I don't know if it gets to 5 years very well, so.
Right.
It's something we continue to advocate for.
Well, something to look forward to.
The 2 projects we've approved where we'd have to trespass to see if there's progress or not, the Blair, the single-family dwelling that was approved for the Blair Estate? Did they ever move forward with that in the middle of Crabtree?
Yes, they've not moved forward yet. They just received a one-year extension. They've said that material shortages, design issues, so on, are obstructing their ability to finish their plans.
But they want to move forward.
They,
With the
as of a
penalties.
few weeks ago, they still intend to move forward. So.
And then the project up at the old Arden Shore Child and Family Services property, that was going to be half driving range and one
Yeah, that's moving.
large estate with 2 accessory structures on the lake.
Yes, I think, I don't know the exact status of it right now. I know that the clearing is pretty well underway for the driving range. There's been a lot of tree work out there, and I think they've constructed like a temporary driveway for construction. I believe we've issued permits for the accessory structures. I still don't think we've received a permit or a set of plans for the main structure.
And I
that's
did
a
see
few-
Sam
that's a-
Badger.
Information's a few weeks old now.
I did see Sam Badger last weekend, the former member of the PCZBA, and every month he asked about Stonebridge. So I promised him I would continue, and that was his first question out of his mouth, what's happening on Stonebridge? So can you update us on Stonebridge?
Nothing going on Stonebridge. The only update I can give, which is a non-update, as I think people may know, we obtained some salvage materials from that building, a few months ago, and now there are some concrete deer heads in Mr. Drew Irwin's office. As a temporary resting place, I believe. But aside from this,
But no demolition permit has been pulled.
no demolition permit has been issued. They've, again, they applied everything they needed, or provided everything. I think they would need to get one over a year ago, but they have not proceeded with that. I haven't looked lately, but as of a couple months ago, the property was still listed with a broker.
Thanks.
Okay.
And to Sam's usual question, as you know, we were intending to have a workshop regarding part of Block 3 tonight. That didn't quite happen with the holidays and with scheduling for some of their professional folks. Again, expecting that in January at this point.
Anything else on the agenda for January?
There's a lot of maybes, I would say. I think historic preservation, that item will come to you in one form or another. That Block 3 workshop should come before you. I know there have been discussions about zoning relief for Chevy Exchange, but I'm not sure, I don't think we quite have nailed down what that entails yet. Similarly, there's some discussion about electric vehicle chargers at Target that probably takes some action by this group. Other residential projects that don't really have a timeline associated with them. So could be a lot, could be a little.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Cole.
Okay.
And thank you for a very, very productive 2022, and certainly wish you well
Really?
over the holidays and as we enter the new year, so thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good work, Mr. Schuster.